Good evening and welcome to tonight's neighborhood meeting. My name is Celeste Kitsemetry and I'm a senior planner with the city's Development Services Department. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to present to you the neighborhood, a development concept being considered by the owner and development team of 34 to 50 Bradford Street prior to a formal development application being submitted to the city. This provides an opportunity for the development team to hear initial community feedback and incorporate it into their plans prior to making a full and formal development application to the city. We have approximately 40 participants on the call tonight, including Ward Councillor Keenan Aylwin. Thank you all for attending. Please be aware we are recording this meeting for the public record. The recording will be used for the purpose of garnering your input and to respond to inquiries, and will be considered public information. Please also be aware that as a registered attendee tonight, your mailing or email address will be added to the mailing list so that you can receive further information about this application as it progresses. Should you have any questions regarding the collection, please contact the Development Services Department. I would also like to let everyone know that there are staff behind the scenes managing the technology tonight. They're here to make sure that the meeting runs smoothly, to grant participants the opportunity to speak, and to assist with any questions in the chat. Please bear with us if we have any issues, and if for some reason you get disconnected. Please feel free to log in again. The intent of tonight's meeting is to provide members of the public with the opportunity to become familiar with the development application and the planning review process, and to also ask the applicant questions and provide feedback. What to expect tonight is a brief overview of the city's review process and timing, a presentation from the applicant's representative describing the proposal, and an opportunity to ask questions of either the applicant or city staff and provide comments or identify concerns with the proposed application. What not to expect this evening is for city staff to make recommendations on the application or provide a detailed analysis on the proposal, as this will occur later in the review process. Nor will a debate on the merits of the proposal take place between city staff and the applicant. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to quickly highlight the next steps in the application process. The neighborhood meeting is established early in the development process to ensure local concerns are incorporated or addressed through the city's review. After this meeting, we expect that the applicant will make a formal application submission for this development project. Formal submissions undergo a full technical review and must address comments received from this neighborhood meeting, from the city's technical departments and external agencies, and from members of the public more broadly. In conjunction with this, a statutory public meeting will be held on the application at Planning Committee. At the public meeting, applicants present their application to council, answer questions, and provide an overview of and response to any issues or concerns identified during the neighborhood meeting and any additional consultation. As part of the public meeting, members of the public will also have an opportunity to provide verbal or written comments. Following a public meeting, staff will continue the technical review process and the applicants will make any necessary revisions to the development proposal. Once the review process has concluded, a staff recommendation report is brought forward to council for their consideration. All comments received through the review process, including those received at the neighborhood and public meetings, are identified and addressed in the staff report and form part of the staff recommendation on the subject application. I will now move on to the applicant's presentation. And as I mentioned, the proposed project and application will be presented first, which be followed by a question and comment period. So tonight we are focusing on the proposed rezoning of 35 to 50 Bradford Street. The applicant's planner is Trevor Hawkins from MHBC. The proposal will facilitate the development of 2 residential apartment buildings with a shared 6-story podium and towers to heights of 25 and 29 stories for a total of 623 units. I will now hand the meeting control over to Trevor Hawkins to introduce himself and the proposed development. There we go. Thank you very much. Trevor, over to you.
Thanks, Celeste. Good evening, everyone. I'm Trevor Hawkins with MHBC Planning. And with me this evening as part of the ownership group and the project team are Scott Higgins, President of HIP Developments, Joel Doherty, Vice President of Development at HIP Developments, and from the project architect firm, Martin Simmons Architects, Jason Martin and Greg Piccini. And with me from MHBC is Rachel Neiser. And together with Joel Doherty and Jason Martin, I'll be walking through the presentation to introduce our conceptual plans for the site and to show the community what we have in mind for this property. So the first image on the screen that everyone can see, hopefully, just gives you an aerial view of the property looking down Bradford Street. And then just to give everyone some context of the lands we're talking about, they're highlighted in red, located on the west side of Bradford Street running in this area right here, Dunlop Street, and we've got Simcoe Street here, of course, the lake, and the downtown, the transit terminal. The GO station is just off the screen to the south, and this map shows a conceptual 5-minute walking radius and a 10-minute walking radius, as well as the numerous transit routes that serve not only this property, of course, but the downtown that can take you to key destinations, including the GO, the transit terminal, downtown, shopping on Bayfield, road access. Of course, Dunlop Street would take you up to the 400, which would get you through most of Barrie and to the north towards Aurelian, to the south towards York Region. This property has excellent access to pedestrian facilities, future cycling, proposed cycling, transit, and the road network. And then lots of shopping, commercial amenities, employment areas, all within walking distance, just in the downtown, which is just to the northeast of this property, within a 10-minute walk. I'm going to hand it over now to Joel Doherty, who's going to take us through the next couple of slides.
Great. Thank you very much, Trevor, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. I'm Joel Doherty with HIP Developments, developer of the project. We've had the site tied up for a number of years now. We're very excited about the Barrie market. It's a site we're very excited to bring forward. Going back a few years back, it was the Barrie Central Collegiate High School and Prince of Wales School. So as part of a greater land swap as well with the city. So as part of the overall package, we preserved the Fisher Auditorium, which is now part of the city lands, and portions of the Prince of Wales School along Bradford, and that will become a key component of our Bradford Street presence and activation of that area as a parkette. So with our site, as you see in front of you here, it's the yellow is the phase 1 portion here that we're looking at, 2 towers sitting atop a podium. What we've really looked at with this proposal is looking at the Barrie market and the attraction, certainly of the waterfront, the proximity to downtown, GO train. There's a lot to like about it, and it's a very urban site. And so this proposal we have here for you tonight is that it's an urban proposal. We'd heard prior with an earlier proposal we had, it was a bit more of a suburban type or ex-urban type proposal. We've gone more vertical here. Looking at the proposal across Bradford from us, some of the buildings in the 36 stories, 46 stories, much higher. So we felt going forward with the 25 and a 29 story proposal was certainly in keeping with what's happening in Barrie and with the overall growth of the neighborhood. But this is a major urban renewal project. It's going to bring people downtown. There's a great downtown area, great neighborhoods in the area. This could bring 900 people to shop and support the area and help with vibrancy in the downtown. Next slide, please. So as been outlined, it is a 2-tower proposal with a shared podium. So the podium being approximately 6 stories, parking above grade, but as well as some commercial units fronting onto Bradford. And and residential units throughout the podium as well. So it'll be very much an active podium. Over to the left is where we're keeping the Prince of Wales facade and incorporating that into a parquet. And then the two towers moving to the right, 25 stories, then to the shared podium with a rooftop amenity area, and then to 29-story tower there as well. So in total, over 600 units. Predominantly, it'll be 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom units. So it's about 60% 2-bedroom units, 40% 1-bedroom. And it'll be featured throughout the podium as well as up through the towers as well. Again, activating the Bradford Street frontage. There'll be 2 accesses off of Bradford. One is to be shared with the city. That will help service the city lands adjacent to us as well. And then predominantly the parking will be in that podium area. So predominantly above grade, and as well we'll have 102 parking spots surfaced as well to service the project. I'll now turn it over to Jason Martin from Martin Simmons, architect on the project. Excuse me, I think Trevor, do you have to do that?
I think Jason's in now. He just has to unmute himself.
Our staff is taking care of it behind the scenes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep, no worries. 1 second.
Can everyone hear me? Trevor?
Yes,
Good?
you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Jason, I'm Jason Martin from Martin Simmons Architects. I'm the architect who's working with HIP on this development, and we're super excited to present this to the community. This is an image from Bradford Street looking west, and on the right-hand side of the page, you can see the 29-story tower. And on the left-hand side of the page, you can see the 25-story tower. And in the middle between the 2 towers is the 6 stories of parking. And then wrapping the entire development is a 3-story podium of residential and a little bit of commercial spaces. And then in front of the parking podium is a higher podium residential piece, which is 6 stories. On the left-hand side, you can see the retained facade of the Prince of Wales School and the parquet. And on the right-hand side, you can see the Simcoe Street extension. It can go to the next slide. So, and as far as the architecture, what we were looking to do was create a podium that achieves a lot of variation in scale, and you can see that with the 3-story podium height and the 6-story podium height. We're also looking to use a mix of materials and form to help create some real interest in the facade. The units at grade will have terraces and entries, giving the street front a modern townhouse-like feel, and ultimately good activation of the street frontage on Bradford and Simcoe extension and the back access to the site. The towers themselves are a combination of solid wall, punched windows, floor to ceiling windows. So there's a fair bit of variation in the openings of the towers. But more importantly, there's a combination of exposed balconies and I'll call them recessed balconies, which are represented by the red grid facade. That helps to create a variation in scale and texture to the towers. We want to go to the next slide. The top image there is an image from Bradford and Simcoe Street corner, and I just want to draw your attention to the variation in materials and textures of the tower, and again the variation in height, materials, and forms to the podium elements. The bottom image is an image looking through the parquet to the south tower entrance. That's 25-story tower. And you can see a portion of the old Prince of Wales Theatre facade that will essentially form the entry from Bradford Street to the front of the south tower. Next slide. This image here is from the west looking towards the east towards the lake, and you can really see the towers here in context of the future developments in the neighborhood. But you can see the variation in texture of the towers themselves, and podium height and materials at grade. And that's the end of my portion, Trevor, and I think it's back to you.
Thanks, Jason. Just to bring things back to the planning realm, which is why we're here this evening. In terms of the city's official plan, these lands are located in the urban growth center, which in the case of municipalities throughout Ontario, urban growth centers are intended to accommodate the majority of growth. So they're planned specifically to accommodate a specific density target. In the case of Barrie's Urban Growth Center, that would be 150 persons and jobs per hectare. So the expectation is that there would be multiple intensification areas within the city, but the Urban Growth Center would be the primary intensification area. In terms of the land use, the property is within the city center designation. And that designation, which is generally reflective of the downtown, permits a broad range of uses as you would expect in the downtown: commercial, employment, social, cultural, and of course residential. In the case of residential, it's anticipated that medium and high densities are going to be not only encouraged but permitted. So in our case, the development for an apartment project of 25 and 29 stories aligns with those official plan policies and the objectives. And we see that this property is in an ideal location to achieve many of those growth objectives. So some members of the community may recall that this site went through a zoning bylaw amendment in 2018 through till approval by council in 2020. At that time, the property had a few different commercial zones, but through that specific zoning bylaw application, the whole property was brought into the commercial 1 zone with the subset 2. And the SP that's listed on the screen is a site-specific. The number refers to the site-specific regulations that tied back to the bylaw that council passed in 2020 that established a few specific regulations for this property, which were reflective of the older design. And in that case, the site-specific regulations permitted a height of 70 meters on the property. If you sort of viewed the property as a boundary along Bradford Street, if you went back 5 meters from Bradford Street, the height permission went to 70 meters. The parent zoning, the parent commercial 1 zone permits or requires 1 parking space per unit for a project like this in the urban growth center. The reason we're here this evening is to make some changes to those site-specific regulations. So the first change is to increase the height beyond 70 meters. So in the case of, we've got the 2 towers, one 25 stories or 84 meters. And the second tower is 29 stories or 97 meters. So the first part of the zoning bylaw amendment would be to seek an increase to the permitted height from 70 to 84 for the 1 building and 70 to 97 for the second building. The other part of the zoning request relates to residential parking. As I indicated, the rate in the bylaw is 1 space for every residential unit. There's no separate commercial parking requirement in this case. And we're seeking a reduction in the residential parking rate in recognition of the site's location, the transit access, the walkability of the neighborhood, the active transportation, and all of the other ways that someone who lives in this building can move around to key destinations without using an automobile. And the rate we're seeking is just under 0.8 spaces per unit. So just over 20% of the units would not have their own dedicated parking space. And then a holdover from the past, the bylaw passed by council in 2020 is what's called a holding provision. And in Ontario, properties all over Barrie and in other municipalities have what's called a holding provision, or an H. You might sometimes see an H on a property. And that means that the land use has been established for that property, but there are certain conditions that have to be satisfied before you can move forward to get your building permit. And in the case of this property, the 3 requirements for the holding provision are a record of site condition, a construction phasing plan, which is more related to the previous design, which, if members of the community will recall, had 3 different buildings, and there was a more elaborate phasing involved with that design. So that previously required a construction phasing plan. And then because that project was increasing height, there was a community benefits contribution agreement requirement. So those 3 things is also part of our application, and we're intending to move forward and satisfy those 3 holding provision requirements as we move forward with the project. As part of our submission and in consultation with city staff, we're required to submit a number of technical studies. A lot of those technical studies were prepared and submitted with the previous application in 2018. And so we're going to be looking to update all of those studies to reflect the changes in the design and any changes that may have occurred in provincial policies, for example. So planning report, an urban design brief that will reflect the new design and how it aligns with the city's guidelines and policies and the tall building requirements. A shadow impact assessment will form part of that. Of course, you've seen some of the perspectives for the revised design tonight, and they will form part of our application as well. We previously did a functional servicing report, which looked at how to service the lands with water and sewer and how to manage stormwater. So we'll be updating that study to reflect the new design. We submitted a traffic impact study that reflected the old design, which had a mix of different residential units and a more centralized parking structure. We're going to update that traffic study to reflect the numbers, residential units and parking in the new design, and to ascertain if any transportation related improvements are required to get in and out of the property. A cultural heritage report was prepared with respect to the retained Prince of Wales School facade. So we'll be updating that report to reflect the sort of repositioning of the building. The facade's still going to be retained, and it's still going to form part of a park, which was the case in the previous design. It's just more to ensure that the location of the new building is still consistent with those recommendations. And we'll be doing an update to the wind assessment, and the wind assessment is going to look at the wind impacts in the park space along the sidewalk on Bradford, as well as the planned rooftop outdoor amenity areas that the residents of the building can use. And all of these studies will form part of our submission, as well as the comments that we received tonight will be summarized in our planning justification report, and we'll provide responses to the comments and questions that we received this evening. So with that concludes our presentation, and I think I'll pass it back over to Celeste. She's hopping on already. There she is.
Thank you very much, Trevor. And I'll just, if I can share my screen again, just quickly.
Yes.
I'll go over the technical instructions. We are about to start the question and answer period.